I'd like to invite the Right Honorable Prime Minister to now address both houses of the Parliament and our distinguished invited guests.
Merci, Monsieur le Président du Sénat.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker of the Senate, Mr. Speaker of the House of Commons, members of Parliament, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen.
Welcome to Canada's Parliament, His Highness the Aga Khan. I'm also pleased to recognize his family members and Ismaili leaders who have come from across the country and around the world to hear His Highness address the Canadian people. Please, colleagues, welcome them all. As we all know, Canada is home to a well-established and fast-growing Ismaili community. His Highness has therefore become an increasingly frequent visitor and always a welcome one.
In fact, Your Highness, you're not just a visitor. You are now a Canadian citizen, an honorary Canadian citizen.
It's the day you accepted honorary Canadian citizenship, something agreed to by all parties of this House. It was during the foundation ceremony of Toronto's Ismaili Centre, Aga Khan Museum and Park. I'm told construction there has gone well and that the centre will soon portray Islamic contributions to the enlightened pursuit of knowledge.
And this history, recorded carefully, will be accessible to all.
Know this, when you are in Canada, you are home.
In a few moments, His Highness will share with us some of his thoughts.
Our decision to extend Canadian citizenship to His Highness recognizes the reality of values shared and values acted upon. His Highness's lifelong advocacy for humanitarianism, pluralism, and tolerance has gone far beyond words. For example,
the Global Centre for Pluralism here in Ottawa, which was established in partnership with our government at the start of our mandate.
His Highness's Global Centre for Pluralism here in Ottawa advances good governance and engages with societies on the precipice of crisis. Similarly, through the Aga Khan Development Network, His Highness has been tireless in humanitarian and development initiatives in Africa, in Asia, including in Afghanistan, where the network continues to be a brave partner in Canada's efforts to secure and improve the lives of Afghan citizens. Over the years, then, we have built together a solid record of genuine assistance to some of the world's neediest people. Today, that work goes on. In particular, our government and the network cooperate in the development priority that Canada assumed at the Muskoka G8, the promotion of maternal, newborn, and child health.
The death in vain, I would say scandalous, of so many women, babies, and children in developing countries is a horrendous tragedy at our time when medical knowledge is so widespread.
Your Highness, we are delighted to have your personal support and the capable assistance of the Aga Khan Foundation of Canada and the Aga Khan Development Network.
Canadians have the greatest of respect for their work and for your leadership. It inspires us to hope for a better world.
Mr. Speaker, colleagues, Canadians are strongest when we have the support of those who share our values.
As revered as they are in the West, these values are deeply rooted, and they are not simply limited to one culture.
Freedom and democracy, those who desire peace, those who will uphold the basic rights of every man and woman, and those who, such as His Highness, share our belief that pluralism, diversity within a united country, is the basis of all of these things. These are our friends. Your Highness, we have met on several occasions, and like our country as a whole, I value your counsel and your friendship.
It has become clear that there is what I called, at another occasion, exquisite symmetry between your values and Canadian values.
And I quote, "We cannot make the world safe for democracy without first making the world safe for diversity." This is a most Canadian way of seeing things. Effectivement, c'est dans cet esprit.
In fact, in this regard, and being convinced that the freedom of conscience and religion are the basis of our freedoms, the government established the Office of Religious Freedom.
The depth of our relationship suggests more frequent and deliberate dialogue between the Imamat and the Government of Canada would be beneficial. J'ai donc le plaisir d'annoncer qu'à la
I am therefore pleased to announce that at the conclusion of these proceedings, the Imamat and the Government of Canada will sign a protocol of understanding that builds upon our broad historic relationship.
Pleased to announce that after the conclusion of these proceedings, the Imamat and the Government of Canada will sign a protocol of understanding that builds upon our broad historic relationship. Let me just conclude, Your Highness, by returning to the subject of Canada's Ismaili community, which began its life here more than 40 years ago as penniless refugees from Uganda. Yet from that moment on, Canada's Ismailis have become one of Canada's most successful immigration stories.
Your Highness, the prosperity of your followers, their harmonious integration into Canadian society, and the respect that they have inspired could be considered a tribute to Canada's pluralism. And that is no small thing.
The Ismaili combination of self-reliance and willingness to give for the betterment of others and of Canada itself is a reflection of your teachings. And Your Highness, it was a good day for all of us when you told your followers to, quote, make Canada your home. You must be very proud of them. Certainly, we all are. Maintenant, Monsieur le Président.
Now, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, members of Parliament, please join me in welcoming a great friend and partner of Canada, His Highness the Aga Khan.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Prime Minister, Speaker Kinsella, Speaker Scheer, Honourable Members of the Senate and House of Commons, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Honourable Members of the diplomatic community, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. The Prime Minister's generous introduction has been very kind. I am grateful for this invitation, for our association, and for so thoughtfully enabling leading representatives of our community and institutions around the world to join us on this occasion. Thank you, Prime Minister. thankful that these leaders of the Ismaili community will have this opportunity to see for themselves why Canada is a leader in the community of nations. I must also thank you, Prime Minister, for inviting me to become an honorary citizen. May I congratulate you on the gold medals of your remarkable hockey teams in Sochi. As an ex-player myself, I was hoping you would require your honorary citizens to join your team. I'm convinced that the Dalai Lama and I would have been a formidable defense. Merci encore, Monsieur le Premier ministre.
Thank you again, Prime Minister, for your invitation. It is for me an unprecedented honor. It's a feeling, a profound feeling, an objective perception, because I've been told that this is the first time in 75 years that a spiritual leader has addressed the Senate and the House of Commons together as part of an official visit. It is therefore with humility and awareness of eminent responsibility that I address you today, elected representatives of the Federal Canadian Parliament and in presence of other senior federal officials. I have the great privilege of representing the Ismaili Imamat, this institution which has stretched beyond borders for more than 1,400 years and which defines itself and is recognized by an increasingly large number of states as the succession of Shia Imami Ismaili Imams. As the 49th Imam, I have for the past 50 years looked after two inseparable responsibilities: overseeing the spiritual well-being of Ismailis, as well at the same time as focusing on improving their quality of life and that of the people with whom they live. Even if there was a time when Ismaili Imams were also caliphs, in other words, heads of state, for example in Egypt during the Fatimid times, my duties today are apolitical. All Ismailis are first and foremost citizens of their countries of birth or adoption. The reach of the Ismaili Imamat is, however, much larger than it was at the time, since it is active today in many regions of the world. It's in this, from this perspective, rather, that I will share with you some thoughts that I feel are worthy of your presence here today.
I propose today to give you some background about myself and my role, and then to reflect about what we call the Ummah, the entirety of Muslim communities around the world. I will comment as a faith leader on the crisis of governance in so much of the world today, before concluding with some thoughts about the values that can assist countries of crisis to develop into countries of opportunity, and how Canada can help shape that process. First, then, a few personal words. I was born into a Muslim family, linked by heredity to the Prophet Muhammad, may peace be upon him and his family. My education blended Islamic and Western traditions, and I was studying at Harvard some 50 years ago. Yes, 50 years ago. Actually, 56 years ago. When I became the hereditary Imam of the Shia Imami Muslims. The Ismaili Imamate is a supranational entity representing the succession of Imams since the time of the Prophet. But let me clarify something more about the history of that role in both the Sunni and the Shia interpretations of the Muslim faith. The Sunni position is that the Prophet nominated no successor, and that spiritual moral authority belongs to those who are learned in matters of religious law. As a result, there are many Sunni imams in a given time and in a given place. But others believed that the Prophet had designated his cousin and son-in-law, Ali, as his successor. From that early division, a host of further distinctions grew up. But the question of rightful leadership remains central. In time, the Shia were also subdivided over these questions, so that today the Ismailis are the only Shia community who throughout history have been led by a living hereditary imam in direct descent from the Prophet. The role of the Ismaili imam is a spiritual one. His authority is that of religious interpretation. It is not a political role. I do not govern any land. At the same time, Islam believes fundamentally that the spiritual and material worlds are inextricably connected. Faith does not remove Muslims or their imams from daily practical matters in family life, in business, in community affairs. Faith, rather, is a force that should deepen our concern for our worldly habitat, for embracing its challenges, and for improving the quality of human life. The Muslim fusion belief, or the belief in this fusion of faith and world, is why much of my attention has been committed to the work of the Aga Khan Development Network. In 1957, when I succeeded my grandfather as Imam, the Ismaili community lived for the most part in the colonies, ex-colonies of France, Belgium, and the British Empire, or behind the Iron Curtain. These are still this highly diverse community in terms of ethnicity, language, culture, and geography. They continue to live mostly in the developing world, though increasing numbers now live in Europe and North America. Before 1957, individual Ismaili communities had their own social and economic institutions where that was allowed. There was no intent for them to grow to national prominence, and even less a vision to coordinate their activities across frontiers. Today, however, that situation has changed, and the Aga Khan Development Network has a strong presence in several dozen countries where appropriate regional coordination also is useful. The AKDN, as we call it, is composed of a variety of private, non-governmental, non-denominational agencies, implementing many of the Imamate's responsibilities. We are active in the fields of economic development, job creation, education, healthcare, as well as important cultural initiatives. Most of our AKDN activities have been born from the grassroots of developing countries, reflecting their aspirations and their fragilities. Through the years, of course, this landscape has changed fundamentally, with the creation of new states like Bangladesh, the horrors of ethnic cleansing in Uganda, the collapse of the Soviet Empire, and the emergence of new countries with large Ismaili populations, such as Tajikistan. More recently, of course, we have faced the conflicts in Afghanistan and in Syria. But through all of these experiences, the Ismaili peoples have demonstrated an impressive capacity to persevere and to progress. Our work has always been people-driven. It grows out of the age-old Islamic ethic, committed to goals with universal relevance: the elimination of poverty, access to education, and social peace in a pluralist environment. The AKDN's fundamental objective is to improve the quality of human life. Amongst the great common denominators of the human race is a shared aspiration, a common hope for a better quality of life. I was struck a few years ago to read about a UNDP survey of 18 South American states, where the majority of the people were less interested in their forms of government than in the quality of their lives. Even autocratic governments that improved their quality of life would be more acceptable for most of those polled than in ineffective democratic governments. I cite that study, of course, with due respect to governmental institutions that have had a more successful story, including certain very distinguished parliaments. But the sad fact behind so much instability in our world today is that governments are seen to be inadequate to these challenges. A much happier fact is that in the global effort to change this picture, Canada is an exemplary leader. Let me now describe a few examples of a quarter century of close collaboration between AKDN and Canada. One of our earliest collaborations was to establish the first private nursing school in Pakistan, in cooperation with McMaster and the SIDA of that time. It was the first component of the Aga Khan University, the first private university in that country. The nursing school's impact has been enormous. Many of those who now head other nursing programs in hospitals in the whole of the region, not just Pakistan, are graduates of our school. Canada was also one of the first donors to the Aga Khan Rural Support Program in northern Pakistan, tripling incomes in this remote, marginalized area. The approaches developed there have shaped our further collaborations in Tajikistan, in Afghanistan, in Kenya, and in Mozambique. Canada has also helped establish the Aga Khan University's Institute for Educational Development in Karachi and in East Africa, along with other educational initiatives in Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Mozambique, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, and Pakistan, including pioneering work in the field of early childhood development. I could speak about our close ties with Canadian universities also, such as McMaster, McGill, the University of Toronto, and the University of Alberta, enhancing our own institutions of tertiary education, the Aga Khan University and the University of Central Asia. The latter institution has resulted from the Imamat's unique tripartite treaty with the governments of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. It serves some 22 million people who live in Central Asia, in hillside and high mountain environments, areas of acute seismic and economic vulnerability. And I could list many more examples in cultural development and in scientific research. And we are especially proud of the Global Center for Pluralism here in Ottawa, a joint project of the Imamat and the Canadian government. In just 3 years, Canada will mark its 150th anniversary, and the whole world will be ready to celebrate with you. Sharing Canada's robust pluralistic history is a core mission of our Global Centre, and 2017 will be a major opportunity for doing so, operating from its headquarters in the former War Museum on Sussex Drive. Perhaps 2017 and the celebrations can be a catalyst with our neighbours to improve the entire riverfront area around that building. Our partnership in Canada has been immensely strengthened, of course, by the presence for more than 4 decades of a significant Ismaili community. Like most historical global communities, the Ismaili peoples have a variegated history, but surely our experience in Canada has been a particularly positive chapter. I happily recall the establishment of the delegation of the Ismaili Imamate here in 2008, and the Prime Minister's description that day of our collaborative efforts to make Canada, and I quote, the headquarters of the global effort to foster peace, prosperity, and equality through pluralism. We're deeply pleased that we can sign today a new protocol with your government, further strengthening our ongoing platform for cooperation. As we look to the next 25 years of the AKDN, we believe that our permanent presence in the developing world will make us a dependable partner, especially in meeting the difficult challenges of predictability. Against this background, let me move on to the broad international sphere, including the role of relations between the countries and cultures of Islam, what we call the Ummah, and non-Islamic societies. It is central to the shape of global affairs in our time. I would begin by emphasizing a central point about the Ummah, often unseen elsewhere, the fundamental fact of its immense diversity. Muslim demography has expanded dramatically in recent years, and Muslims today have highly differing views on many questions. Essential among them is that they do not share some common, overarching impression of the West. It has become commonplace for some to talk about an inevitable clash of the industrial West and Islamic civilizations. But Muslims don't see things in this way. Those whose words and deeds feed into that point of view are a small and extreme minority. For most of us, it is simply not true. We find singularly little in our theological interpretations that would clash with other Abrahamic faiths, with Christianity and Judaism. Indeed, there is much that is in profound harmony. When the clashes of modern times have come, they have most often grown out of particular political circumstances, the twists and turns of power relationships and economic ambitions, rather than deep theological divides. Yet sadly, what is highly abnormal in the Islamic world gets mistaken for what is normal. Of course, media perceptions of our world in recent years have often been conveyed through a lens of war. But that is all the more reason to shape global conversation in a more informed direction. I am personally aware of the efforts the Prime Minister has made to achieve this. Thank you, Prime Minister. The complexity of the Ummah has a long history. Some of the most glorious chapters in Islamic history were purposefully built on the principles of inclusiveness. It was a matter of state policy to pursue excellence through pluralism. This was true from the time of the Abbasids in Baghdad and the Fatimids in Cairo over 1,000 years ago. It was true in Afghanistan and Timbuktu in Mali, and later with the Safavids in Iran, the Mughals in India, the Uzbeks in Bukhara, the Ottomans in Turkey. From the 6th to the 18th century, Al-Andalus thrived on the Iberian Peninsula under Muslim aegis, but also deeply welcoming to Christian and Jewish peoples. Today, these Islamic traditions have been obscured in many places, from Muslims and non-Muslims alike. The work of the Aga Khan Trust for Culture, including the Aga Khan Award for Architecture and our Historic Cities program, is to revive the memory of this inclusive inheritance. Another immediate initiative is the Aga Khan Museum, which will open this year in Toronto, an important testimonial in a Canadian setting to the immense diversity of Islamic cultures. Perhaps the most important area of incomprehension outside the Ummah is the conflict between the Sunni and Shia interpretations of Islam and the consequences for the Sunni and Shia peoples. This powerful tension is sometimes even more profound than conflicts between Muslims and other faiths. It has increased massively in scope and intensity recently and has been further exacerbated by external interventions. In Pakistan and Malaysia, in Iraq and Syria, in Lebanon and Bahrain, in Yemen and Somalia and Afghanistan, it is becoming a disaster. It is important, therefore, for non-Muslims who are dealing with the Ummah to communicate with both Sunni and Shia voices. To be oblivious to this reality would be like ignoring, over many centuries, that there were differences between Catholics and Protestants, or trying to resolve the civil war in Northern Ireland without engaging both Christian communities. What would have been the consequences if the Protestant-Catholic struggle in Ireland had spread throughout the Christian world, as is happening today between Shia and Sunni Muslims in more than 9 countries? It is of the highest priority that these dangerous trends be well understood and resisted, and that the fundamental legitimacy of pluralistic outlooks be honored in all aspects of our lives together, including matters of faith. Permettez-moi à ce point.
Allow me at this point to address you again in French. I've just spoken about the incomprehension that exists between the industrialized world and the Muslim world, and about how opposing forces have undermined relations with the great traditions of Islam. Yet, our hearts, our minds, and for many, our faith, tell us that harmony is possible. In fact, recent developments are an indication of this. I would like to say that how important constitutional development is in correcting the inability of several existing constitutions to match the evolution of societies, especially when these societies are evolving. This is a fundamental issue that, given my responsibilities, I cannot ignore. You may be surprised to learn that 37 countries throughout the world have adopted a new constitution over the past 10 years, and 12 are at an advanced phase of modernizing their own constitutions. That is a total of 49 countries. In other words, this movement involves a quarter of the UN member states. Out of that 49, 25% have a Muslim majority. This shows that there is now no turning back from the demand by civil societies for new constitutional structures. I would like to take a moment now to speak to a specific political difficulty that involves the Muslim world. Religious parties, by their very structure, are based on the principle of inseparability between religion and daily life. The consequence of this is that when comes the time to negotiate the constitutional terms with those who want separation between state and religion, a consensus over overarching legislation becomes very difficult to reach. However, there is one country that has shown us now that this is possible, and that is the Tunisian Republic. Now is not the time or the place to go into detail on its new constitution. However, allow me to point out that this is the outcome of a responsible pluralist debate, and that it appears to contain the necessary rules to ensure mutual respect between the various parts of civil society. This is reflected in, among other things, the use of the notion of coalition, whether that be at an electoral level or a government level. This is a great step forward for the kind of pluralism that Canada and the Ismaili Imamate have been hoping for. Allow me also to make note of a hopeful outcome of these developments. That is that the forum for debate and conflict within any pluralist society no longer has to be the street or the square, but it can be the constitutional court of a state of law. Besides the genius of Tunisian constitutionalists, the preparatory work for this involved consultations on comparative constitutional law. And I would like to acknowledge in particular the role the Portuguese legal experts have played, citizens of a country that I greatly admire, and that, like Canada, has developed a civilization of mutual respect between communities and openness to religions. I'm referring here to the law regulating relations between the Portuguese Republic and the Ismaili Imamate since 2010. I'm very pleased to add before this very honorable audience that this law was unanimously passed, and it recognizes the quality of the Ismaili Imamate, or the nature rather of the Ismaili Imamate, as being a supranational entity. In conclusion, on the Tunisian constitution, Mr. François Hollande, the President of the French Republic, said in Tunis that what makes your revolution unique and even your constitution is the role of civil society.
Clearly, the voices playing a major role in Tunisia were the voices of civil society. By civil society, I mean an array of institutions which operate on a private, voluntary basis, but are motivated by high public purposes. They include institutions devoted to education and culture, science and research, to commercial, labor and ethnic and religious concerns, as well as professional societies in law, accounting, banking, engineering and medicine. Civil society encompasses groups that work on health and safety and environmental matters, organizations that are engaged in humanitarian service or in the arts of the media. There is sometimes a tendency in the search for progress to focus solely on politics and government or on the private profit-making sector. And surely they both have roles to play. But in my view, the world needs to pay more attention, much, much more attention, to the potential role of civil society. We see it expanding in many places, from sub-Saharan Africa to Tunisia and Egypt, from Iran to Bangladesh. At a time of extreme danger in Kenya a few years ago, the beginnings of a civil war, the former Secretary General of the United Nations, Kofi Annan, led the way to a peaceful solution which rested heavily on the strength of Kenya's civil society. Increasingly, I believe the voices of civil society are voices for change, where change has been overdue. They have been voices of hope for people living in fear. They are voices that can help transform countries of crisis into countries of opportunity. There are too many societies where too many people live in a culture of fear, condemned to a life of poverty. Addressing that fear and replacing it with hope will be a major step to the elimination of poverty. And often, the call for hope to replace fear will come from the voices of civil society. An active civil society can open the door for an enormous variety of energies and talents from a broad spectrum of organizations and individuals. It means opening the way for diversity. It means welcoming plurality. I believe that Canada is uniquely able to articulate and exemplify three critical underpinnings of a quality civil society: a commitment to pluralism, to meritocracy, and to a cosmopolitan ethic. A cosmopolitan ethic is one that welcomes the complexity of human society. It balances rights and duties, freedom and responsibility. It is an ethic for all peoples, the familiar and the other, whether they live across the street or across the planet. The Aga Khan Development Network has worked over 5 decades to assist in the enhancement of civil society. And as we look to its future, we are honored that Canada views us as a valued partner. Thank you, Prime Minister. One key to Canada's success in building a meritocratic civil society is your recognition that democratic societies require more than democratic governments. I've been impressed by recent studies showing the activity of voluntary institutions and not-for-profit organizations in Canada to be among the highest in the world. This Canadian spirit resonates with a cherished principle in Shia Ismaili culture, the importance of contributing to one's individual energies on a voluntary basis to improving the lives of others. This is not a matter of philanthropy, but rather self-fulfillment, enlightened self-fulfillment. During my Golden Jubilee, and this is important, 6 years ago, Ismailis from around the world volunteered their gifts, not only of wealth, but most notably of time and knowledge in support of our work. We established a time and knowledge framework, a structured process for engaging an immense pool of expertise involving tens of thousands of volunteers. Many of them traveled to the developing countries as part of this outpouring of service. 1/3 of those were Canadians. Their impact has been enormous in helping us to achieve best practice standards in our institutions and programs, making us, we hope, an even better partner for Canada. Such efforts thrive when multiple inputs can be matched to multiple needs, which is why Canada's immense economic diversity is such a valuable global resource. One of the foundation qualities of Canada's civil society is its educational emphasis. Studies show that Canadian students, whether native or foreign-born, perform in the very top tier of students internationally, and indeed that more than 45% of the foreign-born population in Canada has a tertiary degree. This record of educational opportunity resonates strongly with the Shia Ismaili belief in the transformative power of the human intellect, a conviction that underscores AKDN's massive commitment to education wherever we are present, not only education for our faith, but also education for our world. To do this, we are engaged in all levels of education. The Aga Khan University in Karachi and East Africa are expanding to create a new liberal arts faculty and to establish 8 new postgraduate schools in collaboration with several Canadian universities. We share with Canada a deep appreciation for the potential of early childhood education. Congratulations, Prime Minister, for your initiative on this. It is the period of the greatest development of the brain. This education is one of the most cost-effective ways to improve the quality of life for rural as well as urban populations. In this regard, let me take a moment to salute the late Dr. Fraser Mustard, whose work in early childhood development will impact millions of people around the world. The AKDN has been fortunate to have been inspired and counseled by this great Canadian scientist and humanist. Quality education is fundamental to the development of a meritocratic civil society, and thus to the development of pluralistic attitudes. The history of Canada has a great deal to teach us in this regard, including the long incremental processes through which quality civil societies and committed cultures of pluralism are built. One of the watchwords of our new Global Center for Pluralism is that pluralism is a process and not a product. I know that many Canadians would describe their own pluralism as a work in progress, but it is also an asset of enormous global quality. So finally, what will a quality civil society require from us? Sadly, the world is becoming more pluralist in fact, but not necessarily in spirit. Cosmopolitan social patterns have not yet been matched by a cosmopolitan ethic. In fact, one harsh reality is that religious hostility and intolerance seems to be on the rise in many places, from the Central African Republic to the South Sudan, to Nigeria, to Myanmar, the Philippines, and other countries, between major religious groups and within them. Again, Canada has responded in notable ways, including the establishment just 1 year ago of the Office of Religious Freedom. Its challenges, like those facing the Center of Global Pluralism, are enormous, and its contributions will be warmly welcomed, and surely it will also serve a worthy model for other countries. In sum, I believe that civil society is one of the most powerful forces in our time, one that will become an increasingly universal influence, engulfing more countries, influencing, reshaping, and sometimes even replacing ineffective regimes. And I also believe that civil society around the world should be vigorously encouraged and wisely nurtured by those who have made it work most successfully. Canada first amongst all. I'm most grateful to the Prime Minister and to you who have given me this opportunity to share, from a faith perspective, some of the issues that preoccupy me when looking ahead. I hope I have explained why I am convinced about the global validity of our partnership for human development. Let me end with a personal thought. As you build your lives for yourselves and others, you will come to rest upon certain principles. Central to my life has been a verse in the Holy Quran which addresses itself to the whole of humanity. It says, "O mankind, fear your Lord, who created you of a single soul, and from it created its mate, and from the pair of them scattered abroad many men and women." I know of no more beautiful expression about the unity of our human race, born indeed from a single soul. Thank you.
Your Highness, Monsieur le Premier Ministre,
Honorable Prime Minister, Speaker Scheer,
Honorable Senators, and members of the House of Commons, distinguished guests, Mesdames and Messieurs.
ladies and gentlemen.
On behalf of all present at this joint session of the Parliament of Canada, I wish to thank Your Highness for your thoughtful address to Parliament this morning. Your Highness, your insight and leadership inspires us all to continue our work of humanitarian intervention throughout the global village. Your words today have underscored for Canadians the importance of humanitarian work as part of our national Canadian vocation as a caring and generous society. The lifelong commitment to the service of humanity exemplified by Your Highness is a beacon to all of us and is greatly admired. During the 2006 inaugural ceremony to establish the delegation of the Ismaili Imamat here in Ottawa, Your Highness said, and I quote, "Even against the most daunting challenges, social and economic progress can and must be a shared experience based on a cosmopolitan ethic and nurtured by a spirit of genuine partnership," end quote. Your Highness, these words convey the essence of our joint efforts.
We share a number of priorities linked to the promotion of social and economic progress, including maternal, newborn, and child health, microfinance and microcredit, and private sector enterprise, especially in Asia and Africa. We also believe that education plays an essential role in closing knowledge gaps the world over, preparing the new generation for success, and meeting the challenges of tomorrow, as well as ensuring that economic development serves human development.
Is a natural partnership in this area, based on Canada's reputation as a global leader in education and the long-standing tradition of the Ismaili Imamat in education development. Through collaborative projects involving several Canadian universities, we are undertaking important work to strengthen jointly the quality of teaching and learning, particularly in such areas as health and medicine, business, and the humanities. Nous travaillons aussi ensemble.
We are also working together to harness the potential of computers and high technology in the classroom and to strengthen elementary education, especially for girls. Your ongoing efforts to promote education in developing countries are admirable. Canadians are inspired by your unwavering commitment to meeting these international development needs, even when you face tremendous challenges.
Your Highness, Prime Minister, the esteem in which we regard His Highness's commitment not only to educational development but to global progress more generally is reflected in the unanimous adoption of a motion in both houses of our Parliament in June of 2009 to bestow Honorary Canadian Citizenship on His Highness. Just permit me to share another of His Highness's visionary statements drawn from his address in 2009 at a graduating class of the University of Alberta, and I quote, "In today's community of nations, a country's standing is no longer recognized simply by what it can achieve for itself, but just as much by what it can do for others," end quote. These words, honorable colleagues, the words are a powerful idea emanating from one of the rare, true global and most highly respected statesmen of our time. They set a high standard that we strive to achieve. And so on behalf of the honourable members of the House of Commons and the Senate of Canada, we thank Your Highness for your visit, for your inspiring message this morning, and for your continuing efforts to make this world of ours a better place.
Your Highness, Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker of the Senate, honourable senators and members of the House of Commons, right honourable friends, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of all members of the House of Commons, it is a personal honor to be able to add my thanks for your presence here today and for your kind and inspirational words, Your Highness. During the nearly 57 years in which you have been Imam, much has changed around the world and for Ismailis. One constant throughout, however, has been your unwavering dedication to improving the lives of the world's most vulnerable. Your leadership in these bold initiatives has garnered support from countries, organizations, and agencies the world over, and Canada, and indeed Canadians from across our country, are proud to count themselves among your most ardent supporters.
Particularly important to parliamentarians is the fact that you have also taken the initiative of underscoring the key roles that dialogue and respect for diversity play in consolidating democracy on a global scale. Your perspective has enlightened countless people here in Canada and elsewhere, in countries where your agencies have worked for many years, hand in hand with the Government of Canada.
As we all know, an important element of true dialogue is respect for different positions and for diversity. Fundamentally, it is about respecting and honoring the dignity of all people. In this, you are and have always been a clear beacon and an example to follow. Your unabating tolerance and hope in the face of challenging circumstances and seemingly insurmountable odds is an inspiration for us all. L'engagement à ces idées.
The commitment to these ideals that you and the Government of Canada share has resulted in the establishment right here in Ottawa of the Global Centre for Pluralism. Like all the other projects to which you've devoted yourself, this centre focuses on research, education, and dialogue with partners from here and abroad.
Your knowledge, your vision, your commitment, and your dedication, you are changing the world and making it a better place for those who are most in need of our assistance. Au nom de tous les députés.
On behalf of all members, I thank you once again for everything that you have done and everything that you continue to do. Thank you.